So today we're with Joanne Condon, who is the National Manager at the National Advocacy Service Ireland. You're very welcome to the show, Joanne.
Thank you very much.
You
Great
might
to be here.
start, if you will, just by telling us when National Advocacy Service was set up and what it was set out to do.
Yeah, no problem. So the National Advocacy Service was actually first established way back in 2005 as a series of advocacy pilot projects initially. And then through the years, it's developed. Today, it stands as a national service with its own board. And we have advocates based right across Ireland in every county. And we provide a free, independent, confidential advocacy service to people with disabilities. That's adults with disabilities, I should say.
Very good. So a person with a disability gets in touch and we'll say it's something to do with housing. Talk us through the process from when they get in touch, will you please?
Okay, absolutely. So the first thing is there's a number of ways that we can be contacted. We have a national phone line that's open Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And people can contact us there on our phone line. And when they call, they will speak to somebody initially and outline what kind of support they're looking for, what is the problem, the issue that they're experiencing. And we will go through just a series of questions to make sure that we're the right service to support the person. If we're not, we will always help somebody to find their way to the right service to support them. But assuming that we are the right service, then their details will be passed to an advocate based in the county that they live. And that advocate will get in touch with them to have a chat and to see, again, if we're the right service. And if we are, then they'll agree a plan as to what issues they're going to support the person with. And they'll begin working together to try and achieve basically progress on the issues they're having. And those issues are very varied. They really can be anything at all.
Very good.
You seem to cover a very wide spectrum of the kind of people you advocate for.
Yes, we do. We work with people with all types of disabilities. So intellectual disabilities, sensory disabilities, people with autism, people with physical disabilities, and people experiencing mental health difficulties also.
Yeah.
Tell me, why should somebody get in touch with the National Advocacy Service instead of going their own way?
Well, look, if you're able to work away yourself to overcome issues, that's fantastic. You know, we want to support people to build their own capacity to advocate for themselves. That's really important, and we do that as part of our work. But sometimes issues are so challenging and barriers are so big that people need help, and that's what we're there for. And, you know, if somebody feels that they don't know how to go about progressing a problem they're having, maybe nobody's listening. Maybe their voice is getting lost and they need somebody to help speak up on their behalf. Maybe they just don't know who to contact or how to explain their problem to somebody else. Or maybe they're experiencing pressure from other people, feeling that they know what somebody should be doing. And it's not in keeping with the person themselves and their choices and what's important to them. So if any of those things resonate, then, you know, that's really what an advocate is there for, is to help somebody to have their voice heard, to be involved when decisions are being made about their life so that they're central in it, and also to access entitlements, services, supports that maybe they're having difficulties getting by themselves.
It's a very important service.
Absolutely, it is. And, you know, the need for advocacy has really grown over the last number of years. People are more aware of the service. We do have some waiting lists operating in places, and you know, we really do need more advocates on the ground, ideally, but we're there to respond. We take all calls to the service. We have a website as well that people can look, advocacy.ie. I should mention our phone line number, which is 0818 07 3000. And there's lots of different ways people get in touch. You can email. There's even a little function on our website where people can make an inquiry directly.
I might ask you right at the end to repeat all that, just so in case there's somebody out there listening who needs to get in touch.
Absolutely.
UNCRPD, that was supposed to be the all-conquering guarantee to equality and rights for people with a disability. I presume this is a huge area for advocating.
It is, you know, and a big part of UNCRPD is ensuring that people have access to support when they need it to exercise their autonomy and their rights. and that's where we fit in. So advocacy actually fulfills a very important part of making the UNCRPD come to life, because it's all well and good to talk about rights and entitlements. And, you know, if you're somebody who needs support to be able to do that, then you're not going to be able to exercise those rights without accessing the likes of an advocacy service or indeed other supports that enable you to do that. We've a long way to go in Ireland. We've made substantial progress, obviously, particularly with the Assisted Decision Making Act commencing this year in Ireland. We've gladly said goodbye to that awful act from the 1800s, the Lunacy Act, that was really very restrictive of people. So there's lots of positive things happening in terms of seeing people's rights under UNCRPD, start to materialise in Ireland, and that's very positive. And I think, you know, the awareness of advocacy services, the awareness of people's right to have support when they need it, that's all growing, and that's a good thing. And there's been so many resources now developed to help people understand all of these changes, that I'm sure with time, you know, people's rights will be better recognised, but we're not there yet.
We can hope.
Yes, that's a good thing to hang on to.
Are you a funded organisation, or where do you get your funds from?
So all of our funding comes through Citizens Information Board, and that funding comes in turn then from the Department of Social Protection. So we're government funded. As I mentioned earlier, we're entirely free, so nobody has to pay to access to have an advocate working on their behalf.
Right. Some of the big issues we see here in BCIL are the likes of PA hours, access to government services, finance, jobs. Are these some of the main issues that you've advocated for in the past?
Absolutely. Last year, our annual report, which you can find on our website, showed that housing was 39% of our casework, supporting people with social care issues like PAs and all of those type of issues was 22% of our casework. And then you mentioned finances, which was 14% of our casework. And actually, this year, our service are focusing a piece of work on the whole area of access to finance issues for people with disabilities. We are putting together a social policy paper that's going to capture the experiences of people with disabilities, and that's going to be released before the year is over. So, you know, definitely there's many, many different aspects of problems that people with disabilities face, and that's reflected in the work that we do day to day.
Without knowing the full extent of what's on the cards, the Green Paper on disability payments, that's going to be a massive issue for yourselves.
It is. We've been actually attending briefing sessions this week, and we're preparing a submission to try and represent the voices of the people we work with. There's a lot of concern out there about the changes that are coming, and it's our job to make sure that we bring those concerns forward and feed them back to the decision makers. So we're doing everything we can to try and be involved as much as possible in ensuring that all of those concerns are brought to the fore.
The obvious concerns are, for the people who talk to us, are the fact that they may be asked to go on to job seekers allowance and all the tribulations that go with it.
Yeah, and those systems are very complex, for people to navigate. Obviously, there's huge concern. Will people have enough? How will they understand all of these changes? Will it result in them being worse off? Will it be a harder system to navigate than an already difficult system at the moment? These are all questions that we're hearing at the moment from people, and a real worry that this may be a step backwards rather than forwards.
The whole thing about means testing, that can be very stressful as well, can't it, for people?
Absolutely. And, the thing with means testing is that the amount of information that has to be gathered and submitted, even that in itself is something we see people struggle with, is just having to try to collate all the information that is required. It's very stressful. It can take a long time. Very often people are left in difficult circumstances while means testing is undertaken. And it can be very hard to follow, These systems are complex, they're tricky, and very often people do require additional support to even be able to understand, what does this mean for me? And what kind of information do I need to try and gather to go through this process. So it's not straightforward, and it does cause people an awful lot of sleepless nights and anxiety.
in particular people with disabilities and people with profound disabilities?
Yes, I mean, the disability capacity review that was released in the last while shows, the additional cost that people with disabilities have on day-to-day living. And yet we didn't see any significant increase in the most recent budget that would account for that in terms of, like, for example, something like a cost of living, a cost of living allowance that would cover off that additional cost that people experience. So, it really is an area that requires a lot more review, a lot more discussion. We need to hear from people with disabilities about what are their experiences, and that's what needs to inform any decisions that are taken around reform.
Very good. Your website mentions several publications in relating to advocacy. You might mention a couple of them.
Yeah, so last year we produced our first casebook, and what that did was it captured the stories of the people that we support and gave a flavour of the types of issues that we support people with, the types of situations people find themselves in. And that really gives people a good sense of the complexity of the barriers that people with disabilities face, but also the impact that an independent advocacy service can have in getting really good outcomes and, making things better ultimately for people with disabilities. So we're producing another casebook this year. We're hoping to do one once a year. And again, we'll be releasing that before the year is out. So you can follow that on our social media pages. You can check it out on our website when it's launched. It will be launched in December. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be producing a social policy paper on the whole area of access to finances before year end. So again, through our social media channels, through our website, you'll be able to find that. And we've produced similar social policy papers in the past. We did one on COVID-19 and the impact it had on the people that we supported, and you can access that again on our website.
Very good. Big organisations like yourselves who support people with disabilities genuinely have a robust complaints policy. Tell us a bit about yours.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important as part of any service that we are willing to hear if things go wrong and if the service hasn't been what somebody expected it to be. So we do have a complaints policy, and we try to make it as easy as possible for somebody to make a complaint. So it doesn't have to be in writing. Many of the people that we support may not be able to put their complaint in writing. So we will facilitate somebody raising a complaint in whatever format works best for them. We'll always try to resolve that complaint informally if possible, listen to what the person's experience has been, and obviously, what would they like to see happen to rectify it and correct it if that's possible. And then if that hasn't managed to resolve things, we do have a formal complaints process that really gives a more detailed look into the issue and looks at all the parties involved and, again, tries to get to the nub of where did things go wrong and how can we fix it. So we have that information available on our website, again, for anybody who may need to use it. And that's really important that we hear back from people when things don't work.
And that's a healthy policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a good relationship with the Citizens Information Board.
So Citizens Information Board are our funder, and as you may know, they fund a number of important services, including citizens information services right around the country, and money advice and budgeting service, and the sign language interpreting service. And we would often support those who contact our service to also access those other services that CIB fund, because they may be better placed. For example, if somebody was experiencing difficulties, let's just say with social welfare, citizens information services are very knowledgeable on social welfare entitlements and are very well placed to help somebody navigate getting the right information that they need to be able to figure out what their entitlements are, how they apply for them. So they're far better placed than us to give that type of information. So we work very collaboratively to make sure that we're bringing the right service and people together at the right time to get the right information they need.
You're a fairly progressive organisation in that you have a sign language service, mobility aids, assisted technology, etc.
Well, we have a particular remit to work with people with disabilities who don't communicate verbally. So it's really important that we provide a service in a way that works best for people and works in a way that meets their communication preferences and styles. So, we work with people who communicate in all sorts of different ways with assistive technology, people who use maybe iPads, people who use sign language or LOV, people who need interpreters. So we are now working with people from lots of different countries with disabilities. So we will employ the services of an interpreter as needed as well to speak to them through their own language. And we also work with many people then who don't have any formal communication system, and we would spend time with them to understand what their day-to-day life looks like, what their quality of life is, and raise concerns on their behalf in order to improve their quality of life. So there's really quite a lot of work we do in that whole area where people are not able to tell us what the problems are, but yet they may still need somebody to advocate on their behalf.
Yeah, it's very important.
It is, because I suppose those, that portion of society are probably at the greatest risk of being marginalised and not having their voices heard or their experiences understood. So more than anybody, under the UNCRPD you mentioned, those people need to have access to somebody to speak up on their behalf, and to take the time to understand what their day-to-day life looks like and whether it is right for them, whether it's meeting their needs, and then, speak to the people who are able to make those changes on their behalf.
I wanted to ask you how you incorporated the Assisted Decision Making Act into your work.
That's a good question. It's a big piece of legislation, but the really great thing is that advocates have always worked from the basis of the person's own will and preference and keeping them at the centre of things. So it wasn't actually a big change for us, because that's always how we've worked. But what's been exciting is to see broader society now coming to realise the importance of the person's own choices and their own voice being heard. So we've actually found that really great, to be able to talk about, will and preference or somebody's own choice, and to have that now understood in the context of this big piece of legislation that's come, and have laws that support that type of approach, because that wasn't always the case in Ireland, was it? In Ireland, traditionally, people with disabilities didn't often have their voices heard or had decisions made on their behalf, and that's not progressive. That's not an equal society. So it's exciting to see that we have this new piece of law. And of course, there's teething problems when any new law is introduced in a country. So it's not going to be the perfect fix. But certainly the whole idea, the values behind it are very much in line with our values as a service, about empowering people, promoting their independence, making sure that they're respected and that they're treated equally as citizens.
What does the future hold for the National Advocacy Service? How do you improve it?
Well, one big area, we are very keen to seek additional advocacy resources for our service. We do have waiting lists, which is not ideal. We would far prefer not to have those. So that's always a challenge, is trying to seek additional funding for additional resources. We're excited about continuing to use the data that we have from our work to bring about change. So we feed back into the system through, any submissions or consultations that are being done by government, by key organisations. We try to share the experiences of those we support to influence change on a bigger scale. And, that's really important part of our work. Although the core of our work is individual advocacy, we want to see change where the big barriers are there. So we would hope to continue to really have an influence at that level as well. And just overall see a greater awareness of independent advocacy and the role that it plays for people with disabilities.
Now, we're coming right to the end of the interview. I'd just like to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to put out there?
I think we've covered a lot. I just, again, maybe I'll mention our contact details.
Absolutely.
So our phone line is 0818 07 3000. And as I said, that's open Monday to Friday from 10 to 4. And then our website is advocacy.ie. And the last thing I would mention just is that the National Advocacy Service also provides the Patient Advocacy Service, which is funded by the Department of Health. It's a separate arm of our service with its own team. But that's also an important service, and people can find information and links to that on our website as well. And that's in terms of providing advocacy to people in hospitals, nursing homes who may need to make a complaint and they need support to do so.
Very good. Thank you so much for all that. I have to say that the National Advocacy Service is not something we would have been aware of. And we would, people would definitely in the past have come to us with issues that they need solved. But now we know you're there, and we certainly will refer people to you.
Excellent. Well, the more people that are aware that we're there, the better, so that when people do need support, they know where to come to. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And it'd be great to speak to you maybe in a year's time or so, just to see, are there any new developments?
Absolutely, be delighted to do so. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. And that was Joanne Condon, National Manager of the National Advocacy Service, Ireland.